Welcome again to FairTax Power Radio. Thank you for listening this morning. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
And we are
the
FairTax guys. Coming to you live from Big Daddy Studios. Actually, we're recording this one, so this is a recorded show. But we're still at Big Daddy Studios in Gainesville, Florida, coming to you live. The Facebook stream is live. And we'll be on the excluded TV as well if you'd like to go to some place that does not censor political opinion with which it disagrees. Excluded TV, a very modest $30 a year subscription is well worth that. Check that out. And so they have the FairTax guys on along with some other really good programming on excluded TV. Yeah. And you need to check that all out.
Yeah.
There we go. Your turn.
Great. Okay. My turn. Okay, I got to say something now. Right. Anyways,
your turn. I got to get some more.
Yeah, this is, as Bob said, this is pre-recorded. This we're planning this for the 23rd of January.
Because a certain one of us is going to be in the Caribbean on a cruise ship, and it ain't me.
Yeah, you don't have to give them all my whole personal life. But anyways, yeah, my wife is insisting that we get out of the house for a while, so. My wife and I have been very, very busy with our volunteer work. I enjoy it, but she is insisting that we take a break, so we will.
But as this streams live on Facebook, the comments will still be here. Randy and I will be here, responding to the comments that come up as this video streams. So we appreciate that as well. But we've got some good feedback. Some really good feedback that we're going to start to respond to on this particular program of FairTax Power Radio. And again, remind everyone that our email address is thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. TheFairTaxGuys, all one word, @gmail.com. And we're going to respond to something that somebody sent to that address here in just a second. You can also leave us a comment or a question on our Facebook page. The FairTax Guys has a Facebook page. Check that out. Yeah. And again, if you have a thoughtful, considering question that you really want some help with the fair tax, understanding the fair tax, or help with explaining it to other people that are trying to ask you about it, then we would certainly be glad to help that out. And we're going to start with something that a gentleman named Ray Johnson sent us.
So let's start with Erica first.
Oh, you want to start with Erica first?
Yeah, just because it's very brief.
I have been overruled. Go ahead.
Well, this is very short. She is a contributor to, and we really appreciate the comments we get from our listeners and our viewers. Every accredited university in the country is studying the fair tax. Ooh. I have a master's degree in accounting and was required to know the fair tax. Why can't this get passed? Well, the last question there, that would...
Two words, Congress critters.
Yeah. But I was very pleased to know, according to her, every accredited university is studying the fair tax. And we know from our work with Jade Wally, right? He has invited us out in May to his alma mater to talk about the fair tax.
Well, it kind of makes sense. If there are economists at accredited universities, an economist would have to be studying this. They don't all necessarily have to like it, but they do look at it. But if you look at it with an unbiased eye, once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Bingo. So that came from who now?
So that was Erica. Okay. Now we got Mr. Johnson.
Now I can do Johnson. Okay. Yeah. You go ahead and read what he wrote.
Okay. I have read books and started listening to FairTax Power Radio, and I think I'm pretty good arguing the fair tax, but I got an argument that got me. It might come back to the prebate, but basically he said
Apparently someone was making this argument to him, wanting to figure out.
Here's his example. This is going to be interesting. Tim is an average Joe and makes $50K a year, and it takes $40K of that to cover his bills. Okay, and Tom makes $300K a year, and it takes $150K to cover his bills. Tim with $10,000 and Tom with $150,000. Can't you see that the rich pay less effective tax in this scenario? Could come up with a reasoning why this is wrong.
Okay. Well,
there's so much wrong with this.
Your friend is throwing you an EFIS pitch, hoping that you're going to whiff on it. Okay. Yeah. Note that what he's just said, that Tim makes $50K, spends $40, has $10 left over. Tom makes $300, spends $150, has $150 left over. There's no mention of tax rates anywhere in this example, and you are being led to the conclusion that the guy that has more left over is not paying a high enough tax rate. Now, that can only come from the mind of someone who thinks that it is the tax code and the government's job to equalize everybody's,
Yeah.
Everybody's supposed to have the same amount left over after their bills, and that's just not the way it works.
No.
But,
that's, and it is not the duty of the tax code or the people that run the tax code to penalize people for making too much.
Now, I will toss this out to you. If Tim is making $50,000 and spending $40,000, he's probably going in the hole, because under the current income tax, there would be more than $10,000 withheld from him.
Yeah, that's right. He would be in the 25% tax bracket. He's sending $12,000 to the federal government, so that leaves him $37,500. And if he's spending $40,000, he's got a problem.
Yeah, but what Ray brings up here reminds me of something that we did here on FairTax Power Radio several months ago. We went through an entire PowerPoint presentation about the prebate and how the prebate affects people at different income levels. And since Ray has brought this up, if we can get Gabe in the control room to go ahead and pop that up a little bit, let's go through this again, that we have done this. So if you start with a poor family, and we use the 2018 poverty level for this poor family, and you would see if they would spend $32,920. That's a poverty level for a family of 4 here in 2018. 23% of that is $75.72. That's the amount of fair tax that will be collected from that poor family at the cash register on that level of spending, but their prebate equals the same amount of fair tax that they pay at the cash register, making their effective tax rate, wait for it, zero. So that works. And Ray, it's kind of interesting that you would mention somebody here that spends $40,000, because a couple of months ago when we prepared this slide, we actually used a $40,000 spending level. That's the next one up there. A slightly better off family than the poverty level. Let's say they spend the $40,000 that Tim does in your example. Tim would pay $9,200 in fair tax. That's 23% of $40,000. Assuming the household size is the same, and we're assuming the household size of 4 here, that Tim would get the same prebate of $75.72, meaning that he takes out of his pocket $1,628. $1,628 comes out of Tim's pocket to pay the fair tax that's not reimbursed by the prebate. And if you express that $1,628 as a percentage of the $40,000 that he spends, Tim's effective tax rate is 4.07%. Now, we didn't have the $150K, but we do have it though. And Ron, you can take this one.
I can barely see it because
you can barely see it. Okay.
Yeah, you're going to have, because the camera's in the way there.
I can see it. A middle class family that spends twice as much, spends $80,000 instead of $40,000. Now that family is going to pay twice as much fair tax. Note the $18,400 versus $19,200,
right.
But they get the same prebate. $7,572 is the prebate based on your household size. So this middle class family that is spending $80,000 rather than $40,000 is taking $10,828 out of their pocket. And if you express that as a percentage of that $80,000 in spending, you double the spending from $40,000 to $80,000. You more than triple the tax rate from 4.07 to 13.54. So, Ray, I would suggest that you use this approach on somebody that's saying the rich guy is not having a high enough tax rate. His tax rate is going to be much higher. I did the math on this. I don't have it on the slide here, but the example that you gave us, your Tom that has $150,000 worth of spending, if you consider he gets the same prebate as everybody else here, his tax rate is just shy of 18%. So your guy who's spending $40,000 pays a tax rate of 4.07. The guy that's spending $150,000 is taxed at 17.95 is what it came
there
out.
You go.
And let's go. Maybe you can see this one because it's on the right side of the screen there. Let's go carry this off the chart to somebody who really spends a lot of money. Go.
Okay. Now this is assuming that we got a rich family. So let's see what they're making $1 million and they're spending $1 million. Okay, per year. And the fair tax on that is $230,000 because it's 23%. They get the same prebate. This assumes that these 4 families are all the same size, like mom and dad and 2 kids, something like that. Okay, so they get the same prebate. The prebate is only determined by the number of people in the household. That's it. It has nothing to do with your income. So they're actually out of pocket is $222,428, and making the effective tax rate very close to the 23%. So, as Bob has said over and over again, it is mathematically impossible for a wealthy family to pay less or a smaller rate than a poor family. It just doesn't happen. If you're watching this on your computer, you should do a screenshot. Do a screenshot, print this out, and whenever somebody talks, well, the fair tax, benefits the rich. The sales tax is regressive. It's going to hurt the poor. No, take a look at this. This is a great example. I really compliment Bob for creating this PowerPoint. Very good. So there you have it, folks.
There you go. Now, Ray, you can note that Ray was whoever was asking Ray this question was really focusing on how much does a family have left over after they, take care of what they spend on.
Yeah. What about what they pay in taxes?
Yeah, but they pay their taxes on their spending. But what about? I mean, so what if Tom has $150,000? What's he going to do with that $150,000 that he doesn't spend?
Well, he's going to take it upstairs and stuff it under his mattress.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
This is where savings and investment, which are really kind of the lifeblood of the American economy. So if there's no savings and investment, the economy goes, like that. So if Tom is taxed at a almost 18% rate, Tim is taxed at a 4% rate under the fair tax, and they're still going to be, because remember with the fair tax, you have no withholding. You bring home the 50, Tim brings home the 50, Tom brings home the 300, and what they spend, they're taxed on. What they don't spend, they save and invest to help the economy. So you should be happy that Tom has this much money left over to save and invest, because when he saves and invests, it is available for other people to borrow. Somebody can help start a business with that money.
There you go.
So there you go. But the idea that the rich are not going to pay a higher tax rate than the poor under the fair tax is just a fallacy. So it does not happen. It does not work at all. So hopefully you saved a screenshot of how the prebate actually affects people at various different, not income levels, spending levels, because the fair tax doesn't care how much you make. It cares how much you spend. And if you don't spend it all, you save, invest the rest of it, you're helping the economy.
And there's another point that we're totally ignored here that is especially important for the working poor. And that's if you buy used, no fair tax. There's no double dipping here. There's no fair tax on used stuff. So the people that most need the help, get the help with the fair tax. Because if they have to buy a car, they don't have to buy a new one and pay the fair tax. They can buy a used one and legally avoid the fair tax. So that brings their effective tax rate down even more. It's a great thing.
So, on those examples, we assume that all of the money spent was spent on taxable purchases, being new goods and services.
Yep.
So if you buy used, then you can even lower your tax rate even more than that. But I got a friend that I went to high school with. His name's Martin Winfrey. He lives in Mississippi now. He has turned out to be kind of a left-of-center guy, so there's not a whole lot that we agree on politically. But I'll have to give him credit. He sees a lot of the stuff that I post on Facebook about the fair tax, and he was asking me about it, and he said, well, just go to fairtax.org, look over the FAQs, do some research on the thing. And he actually did. Rather than he did not apply if Nancy Pelosi doesn't like it, it's got to be a bad idea. And, if Mike Pence and Mike Huckabee like it, it has to stink, which is the way some people are thinking.
Yeah.
But Martin actually, put some thought into it. He read through some of the things, and he came back. And it was interesting to me, Ron, that he's come back, as a lot of people do. Well, this might be a problem, and this might be a problem, and this might be a problem, and this might be a problem. And if Martin and people like him would apply that same kind of diligence, so looking for problems in the income tax as they do with the fair tax, they would find a whole lot more stuff to nitpick about the income tax.
Where do you begin?
Than they would about the fair tax. Well, I'll tell you where I began with him. And again, we were talking last week or a couple of weeks ago, in fact, for the past 2 weeks on Fair Tax Power Radio, about why the Democrats should like the fair tax. And a lot of it is that it doesn't matter what your political ideology is. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. There's nobody that doesn't like more money in their paycheck. Ooh. And one of the things, the biggest thing, if I had to pick up just one super positive thing about the fair tax, how it's better than the income tax, it would be that the fair tax gets rid of federal withholding, and it gets rid of the most regressive taxes on the books. That's the payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare. You don't get those back. I mean, a working poor person that pays those payroll taxes, you don't get that back. If stuff is withheld from you, you might get that back in a tax refund.
So what would your paycheck or your retirement distribution look like with no federal withholding? Think about it.
So Martin, here, listen, the difference is between the fair tax and the income tax. With the fair tax, you bring home the full gross amount of your paycheck, minus, of course, any voluntary deductions if you've got insurance taken out, if you've got something to go into savings. If you live in a state with an income tax and the state withholds some of their income tax, the fair tax doesn't touch that. But your paycheck is going to be much, much bigger because there will be no federal withholding. There will be no federal payroll taxes. And so that doesn't cost your employer a dime, and you bring home a whole lot more money in your pocket with the fair tax than you do with the income tax. With the income tax, the government continues to take a big chunk of your money for itself out of your check before you even get it, which means, and we've harped on this over and over, and it makes my blood boil every time, when you think that the government has set itself up as everybody's highest spending priority. You will pay me before you spend a dime on your family is the philosophy behind withholding, and that is what the government is telling you with the income tax, that we are your highest spending priority. You feed the government before you feed your family. With the fair tax, with the prebate, that means you don't pay any tax out of your pocket until you have supplied the basic necessities for your family. You feed your family before you feed the government. And if there was nothing else superior about the fair tax over the income tax, that should be enough to get people to convince their Congress critters to pass H.R. 25. And again, we still don't, at this moment, we don't have what the bill number in the Senate is going to be in the new Congress. But H.R. 25, the fair tax, gives you your choice. Bring home the full gross amount or close to it if you have other deductions, or let the federal government take a big chunk, and what's actually doing when they take that chunk, you are giving them an interest-free loan.
Yeah. You know, we've had this income tax for, let's see, this is 2019, so 106 years. And we've grown numb to the fact that it's immoral that the government has to put themselves ahead of your family. That's not the way it should be.
That is what withholding does, folks. The government gets your money before you do. You pay Uncle Sam before you spend a dime on baby formula and bread. It's just not right.
Is there anybody in any political party that thinks that's a good idea?
Okay. There's always some people somewhere. So let's allow for the fact that there may be some folks out there that actually think that way.
Calm down.
But, rational, logical, thinking people would rather have more money in their paycheck than not. And that crosses party lines, that crosses ideological lines, that crosses everything.
Yeah.
But another really great thing about the fair tax that I've tried to explain to Martin, no tax returns, ever. Now, Martin was telling me about how he goes through, he's a real estate appraiser. So he knows kind of a lot of stuff like that. He deals with a lot of numbers, and he talks about, well, I have to save and sort receipts. I go through my checkbook register, and he was really trying to make the case, well, it's not that big a deal. All I really have to do is keep my receipts. All I really have to do is go through my checkbook register and see what's deductible and what's not. And what's deductible, your idea of what's deductible and what's not, and the IRS's idea of what's deductible and what's not might not always coincide. But anyway, he's saying, well, I go through all this. I've done my own taxes by hand for over 40 years.
By hand?
Yeah, he says by hand. And I tell him, well, I use TurboTax, and I've got a fairly simple return, and it still takes me 2 hours. But because you still got all these documents. But with the fair tax, no tax returns ever. They're gone. You don't have to save receipts. You don't have to go through your checkbook register figuring out what's deductible and what's not. You don't have to have the IRS trying to give you any hassle about any of that. All your tax returns are gone. With the fair tax, you pay your federal taxes anonymously at the cash register when you buy things. And with the income tax?
Let's see. Spending hours filling out a simple form, even a simple tax return, All right, and it doesn't sound like his would be a simple tax return.
I don't know anything about his. The government knows a lot about Martin's finances. I don't. Uncle Sam sure does.
On top of that, share all the intimate details of your personal life with the experts in the government. Oh, that's one. Extensive record keeping. Yeah, all year long. You have to make sure that you save your expenses in the proper categories, like if you're using Quicken or something like that, some home accounting program, you got to take care of that. You got to file stuff. You got to come up with the receipts. And all that stuff is gone under the FairTax. Now, if you want to save this information because maybe you're running a business and you want to track your expenses and so forth, fine. But as an individual, you don't have to do any record keeping under the FairTax. You go to the store, you buy something, the FairTax is on the receipt, you've done your duty, you've paid your taxes. It is that simple. Yeah. Now you write a check to the plumber, the FairTax is included in it. You're done.
You talk about experts in the government. You know what an expert is, right? An X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So that may apply to some of those folks up there. Another, if you're going to compare, if you're looking for things to nitpick about the FairTax and to nitpick against the income tax, think about this. With the FairTax, you are absolutely, positively, ironclad guaranteed to get a tax refund if you're a legal household once a month. With the income tax, you get a tax refund once a year, maybe.
Yeah, if the IRS has everything going and their computers didn't get hacked and and nobody stole your identity and you don't get a letter saying, I'm sorry, we already sent your refund to you.
Mm-hmm. Along with 1,500 others to the same address.
Yeah, exactly. So, so maybe once a year after you're doing all the record keeping and all the reporting that you'll get a refund. But with a FairTax, every month, like clockwork, automatically deposited.
Guaranteed. That's the prebate. And people that will tell you that the prebate is an entitlement are telling you a big fat fib.
No.
The prebate is refunding to you tax that was collected from you that you do not owe. Again, we've gone through this before. You do not owe a dime of tax under the FairTax until your spending reaches the poverty level. Obviously, they're not going to track everybody's spending. That's be logistically impossible. They just simply, and Martin was asking, can the FairTax really assume that everybody will spend up to the poverty level? And the answer to that is yes, they do. And if you don't spend up to the poverty level, you get more back in prebate than is collected from you at the register. Your tax rate under the FairTax is negative if
that's right.
you spend less than the poverty level, because they do assume that everybody, because the poverty level is just kind of defined as what it takes to supply your basic necessities. Right. And we can assume that everybody is going to supply their basic necessities one way or another.
Yep.
So I would rather get a tax refund once a month guaranteed than once a year maybe. And that's the choice you have, FairTax versus the income tax.
Yeah, the FairTax does not penalize your hard work and productivity, and it actually encourages you to earn more. I mean, if you get a second job, you're working part-time, like at night or on weekends, it's not going to hurt you in the tax code. You're going to be taxed on what you choose to spend. And if you want to save that extra money because you want to buy a house someday, fine, great. No problem.
That you can do. So you bring home the full gross amount of your paycheck versus having a big chunk of it withheld. You have no tax returns ever. April 15th is just another lovely spring day under the FairTax. With the IRS and the income tax, you spend hours filling out forms. You have to keep all kinds of records, and there's a very big danger that the number you come up with for what you owe is not going to be the same thing that the government comes up with what you owe. And then it's the burden of proof is on you to prove that they're wrong.
Yeah, you're guilty until
when the judge,
innocent.
Jury, and executioner are the ones that are saying you're wrong in the first place, then you've probably got a problem.
That sounds kind of backwards too, doesn't it?
It does. And a tax refund once a month versus once a year, maybe.
Yeah.
So those are just three of the things. I think, man, time is really flying here in this episode of Fair Tax Power Radio.
Yeah.
Martin, I guarantee you we're going to get to next week. We're going to go through some more of the things that you talked about and more comparisons between the fair tax and the income tax. And I think once people get past the partisan rhetoric and once get past, would you rather have a bigger paycheck or not? Yeah, I would. Would you like to get a refund once a month? Yeah, I'd like to have that. There are a lot of people, again, we were talking last week and the week before that about why Democrats should like it, progressives should like the fair tax. Mm-hmm. Nobody doesn't like more money. Why would they not do that?
And nobody likes the IRS. I've been to public events talking about the IRS. Nobody loves the IRS, believe me.
Even people that work for the IRS probably.
Yeah, and I've talked to some of them too, and they have some horror stories.
Oh, I bet they do. And I remember the comment we got on one of our live broadcasts a couple of weeks ago from somebody. He didn't really identify himself as an IRS customer service agent, but from the context of his question or his comment, it looked like it was. I'd love to get more input from him. I'd love to call him up and talk to him here on FairTax Power Radio. Maybe we can do that. But we got about 5 minutes left, and you've got all your logo store props that you like to talk about. So we will continue the comparison between the FairTax and the income tax next week here on FairTax Power Radio. Next week's is also going to be pre-recorded because Ron is going to be on a cruise while we're gone. But Randy and I will be here taking your comments and talking to you live on Facebook as we stream. And of course, we would encourage folks to subscribe to Excluded as well. You can check out the FairTax guys on excluded.tv. Check that out. Now it's your turn. Go.
Yep. Okay. FairTaxLogoStore.org. FairTaxLogoStore.org. Demonstrate your support for the FairTax by wearing a FairTax hat or a jacket or a shirt. I mean, maybe you're going to volunteer.
Let me borrow that pen. I need to make a note here.
Yeah, FairTax pens. And when you go to a restaurant, and you sign the check, leave the pen. Somebody will pick it up, all right? It's got FairTax information on it. If you want to pass out information, these information cards, all right, are available at the FairTax Logo Store. And we will be getting new prebate cards. But these are very popular. They're the size of a business card. Basic information about the FairTax on one side, the prebate schedule on the back side. So even if you get to 2018, we're going to have some new figures here in 2019. It's going to take us a while to get them and to create some new cards and order them and so forth. But the 2018 are going to be okay. The concept is good. If anybody wants to know about the prebate, it's right there. These pins are very effective. You wear these pins. My wife has these on the strap of her purse all the time, and we have collected some great volunteers because they saw this and they've heard about it before, and they wanted to talk to my wife about, hey, what can you tell me about that FairTax? And next thing you know, they're volunteering to help us. So whatever level you can do, to support the FairTax, we encourage you to do it.
We need to get your friend Rudy to get some FairTax Rubik's Cubes. We'll work on those.
How would that work?
I'll see if I can get one figured out. I've got some that have pictures on them instead of just colors, and you have to put the pieces back together to make the picture.
But that should be just dandy.
I say we do have a few minutes left on this episode. Let me remind everybody that the new Congress that took effect a couple of weeks ago, all of the legislation that did not pass is just dead. It has to be reintroduced, and we can encourage everybody again that you've made comments about stuff on PopVox, POPVOX, popvox.com. You go down there, you register, you tell them where you live so they know what your congressional district is, and then any comments you make about any piece of legislation, and believe me that the Congress critters, the Congress critters themselves probably don't look at this, but every last one of them has staff whose job, has at least one staff person whose job it is to keep an eye on PopVox and know what's a hot button issue in their district and what their constituents are concerned about, what their constituents are thinking. So the more comments we can get from more different people supporting the FairTax, and at the same time telling them that the other, well, at least 30-some tax proposals that have been introduced into the new Congress already, they're not as good. So you do go out to, if you need to re-up on PopVox, go ahead and do that. We'd encourage folks to use that platform. We encourage folks to contact your Congress critters directly. An email is nice, but a phone call or an in-person visit would carry a little more weight if you would like to do that. If your Congress critter is a FairTax co-sponsor or a FairTax supporter, thank them for it. If they're not, ask them what they love about the IRS.
And let me remind you, the 115th Congress that just ended in December, over 1,700 proposals to change the tax code in the 2 years of the 115th Congress.
And we still have to look up how many of those became law. We'll figure that out eventually.
But on PopVox that Bob was talking about, great website, the FairTax HR 25 enjoyed a 97% popularity. 97% of the people who weighed in liked the FairTax, and 3% said they didn't like it. That tells you something.
Okay, well, we will continue this discussion comparing the benefits of the FairTax versus the horrors of the income tax next week here on FairTax Power Radio. Till we meet again, thank you for listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
We are the FairTax guys, reminding you again that the FairTax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Oh, these income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. Who are you?
We're the FairTax guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FairTax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Yeah.
Hey, hey.